Took my hair down for the day. Hello, hello. Hello. Okay, looks good. Hello, my name is Pamela. I am a tax advisor for solopreneurs, freelancers, and independent contractors. I help them get their finances situated for tax purposes according to IRS guidelines and regulations. I do this so that in the off chance that they are audited, because small businesses have a higher chance of being audited, they are able to answer any questions that are raised by the IRS. Today is a quick scope. I am going to cover a few things, myths pertaining to freelancers and independent contractors. And it's mostly about, all of my scopes this week are pretty much going to be about from the perspective of the IRS. So today's scope, myths for freelance taxes and independent contractors. So to jump right in, first myth, I don't earn enough to file. Some people believe that if they are making money on the side, especially if it's their only source of income, they are not required to file taxes on that. The truth is, if it's more than $400, you are actually required to report that to the IRS. So if you are a freelancer and you make $400 after expenses, you have to pay self-employment taxes, which includes FICA and Medicare. Again, if you are a freelancer or independent contractor, that means that the person that is paying you is not turning in your federal taxes. Federal taxes, state taxes, and Social Security and Medicare. So as a freelancer or an independent contractor, you are required to turn that money in yourself. Also, if the IRS gets a 1099 for $600 and you have zero expense, they don't know that you have expenses. So they are going to tax you for that full $600 amount. So it would be in your best interest as an independent contractor, if you receive a 1099, to report any expenses you had to earn that money. So if you made $600 for a project and you had to buy your supplies or tools or anything like that, you can use those expenses to offset the money that you made. So instead of reporting $600, you can report $450 for the so that's the $600 minus the amount of money that you spent to earn that $600. So that's myth number one. I don't earn enough to file. If after expenses you have $400, you are required to file. Number two, I don't have to include that money because I didn't get a 1099. This one is the most common that I've come across, just because you're paid cash. Or even if you receive a check but the person that paid you did not report that money. I'm sorry, because they didn't give you a 1099 at the end of the year, that does not mean that they did not report it to the IRS. So even if you do not receive a 1099, you are still required to report that money. So if you don't receive a 1099, you are still required to report the money that you made. Number 3, I don't have to include that money because I got it under the table. So there's no such thing as under the table or off the books. Any money that you received, if it's a cash, if it's a check, you have to report that money. If you receive that money in exchange for work that you did. So there's no such thing as under the table. Even if it's, and I actually had a webinar about this last week, even if it's considered to be illegal activity, the IRS still expects you to report that income. There's no such thing as under the table. So if, let's see, sometimes a freelancer might ask, how would the IRS know? It's not about them knowing how much money it is exactly, but if you are questioned, if you are called up, you receive a letter from the IRS and they want to do an audit based on what you filed on your taxes, they also take into consideration your living, your lifestyle. So if you reported $30,000 income and you live in a $300,000 house, how are you able to afford this more than just having good credit? You know, you got this fancy car, this fancy house, but you're only living off of $30,000, $40,000. So, okay, unless it's tax exempt. So with that, they go through all of your accounts and they are trained to look at these types of things, your living, your lifestyle, and things like that. So it's more than just what you actually reported. How is the IRS going to find out? They have ways of going about this, especially if you are, if you're audited by the IRS, they have ways of looking at this. If we're living in a digital age and you have credit cards and they go through your credit cards. How are you paying for this credit card? How are you paying for these expenses that you are incurring if you only made a certain dollar amount of money? And if you cannot prove where that money came from, they're going to audit you based on that. How would the IRS know? It may come to something as far as tax evasion or tax fraud or something like that. The IRS will find out. What number am I? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't count as income if you bartered for it. To barter means you, cash is king. But the way the IRS sees it, even if you don't receive cash and you exchange services, the value of that service is still taxable. So if I do your taxes for you and you in turn design my logo, we've still made money off of each other, and that value is still reportable to the IRS. That is not, I know that is on the IRS website. Send me a message and I can send you a link to that to show you where the IRS is specifically states bartering is taxable income. But if you have any questions, I'll be happy to ask about that. Okay, so with that and going off of what you're saying, no one else knows I put in this kind of this income. So just because your friends or your colleagues are not reporting their self-employment or freelance or side hustle money doesn't mean it's okay for you to do it also. And just because they haven't been caught doesn't mean that you won't be caught. And it doesn't mean that they won't get caught eventually. So just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean it's okay for you. That is something that I've heard quite a bit of also. If you get audited, you still have to prove again how you're able to maintain the lifestyle that you have. And the last one, the myth for freelancers and independent contractors: I don't earn enough for the IRS to bother with me. So, with that, again, I did a webinar last week. The small businesses or self-employed are more likely to be audited than any other. This includes S Corps and C Corps, corporations, businesses. So if you, I think the dollar, I don't remember what the dollar amount was, but if you are a freelancer or an independent contractor, and you run a small business, you are more likely to be audited than someone who has a S corporation or a C corporation. So so with your tax returns, make sure you have your information as accurately as possible, the majority of income types. So with that, that was my quick scope for this evening. Did I give you 10? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 myths, 7 tax myths for freelancers and independent contractors. Number 1 is I don't earn enough to file. Again, if you net more than $400, you are required to report that. And when I say net, that means your gross minus your expenses. I don't have to include that money with because I didn't receive a 1099. Myth number 2. If you don't receive a 1099, that does not mean that that income was not reported to the IRS. Maybe your 1099 got lost in the mail. If the person you did the work for doesn't issue a 1099, which they're not required to do unless they paid you more than $600, that does not mean that they are not required to keep a record of that anyways. So as a business, they are required to keep a record of everyone that they paid. And if they just so happen to be audited and they show you as a vendor and the IRS has to verify that information and it shows that you did not report your income, you've opened yourself up for an audit also. So just because you did not receive a 1099 is not reason enough to report that income. Number 3, I don't have to include that money because I got it under the table. Also, with that, there's no such thing as under the table. There's no such thing as off the books. And again, on the IRS website, even if it's illegal income, you are required to report that money. Let's see. So someone might ask, how would the IRS know? In the event of an audit, they go through your records and they want to be able to verify that you are making the type of money to justify your living standards. I guess I could word it like that. So with the example I gave earlier, if you're only making $30,000 but you're living in a $300,000 house, the IRS wants to know, how are you able to maintain that lifestyle? So it doesn't count as income if you bartered for it. If you barter services, it is considered taxable income by the IRS. So don't think that just because you didn't receive cash for it, you don't have to report it. No one else knows. No one else I know does this. So again, don't let somebody else get you in trouble. If someone you know is not reporting their income the way that they should be, that does not mean that it is okay for you to do also. We don't know how the IRS chooses who they audit, and one day it just may be you and not the person who's been doing it for the past 20 years. And last, I don't earn enough for the IRS to bother me. There's a certain dollar amount or group where they are more targeted by the IRS for audits than any other group. And it has become commonplace for individuals to set up a business so that they can lower or increase their tax bracket so that they could qualify for certain tax credits or deductions so that they can increase their refund or decrease their tax liability. So it's for that reason and that may be one of the reasons that they target that specific income bracket. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. For those of you that came in, thank you so much. If you're catching a replay, please share this out. The tax myths for freelancers and independent contractors. If you need any help with that, just click on the link in this title. Tax help for freelancers, independent contractors, entrepreneurs, and setting up their finances to manage their income according to IRS guidelines and regulations. So I am wrapping it up right now. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. If you have any questions, again, just click on the link. All right. If you have any questions, are there any questions? All right. Thanks. Good night.